Good morning, Nick.
Good to see you, Matt.
All right. Well, we have a really interesting topic today, one that touches me deeply as a former student athlete. And it is a New York Times article from July 30th, 2025 by Sarah Shepard. And the title is The Sheffler Paradox, How Athletes Cope with Winning How Athletes Cope When Winning Is Not Enough. So, Nick, do you want to introduce the topic and get us rolling?
Yeah, so I selected this article for us to talk about. I love and find quite illuminating interviews and discussions by athletes. And I think one of the reasons is actually mentioned in this article, so you look it up, is, their performance is very public. Their achievement is very public. They're assessed in terms of their achievement. So we study achievement context. What's more achievement oriented than an athletic competition? It's very explicit. And many of these highest performing athletes are also almost philosophical. They've really examined the psychology, the motivation, and to some extent the philosophy. And I think in this case, very much so, the philosophical dimension, the existential dimension, the sense of meaning, purpose, and fulfillment are being talked about, maybe not exactly the way we do. And so I think there's something about these elite performance contexts that has unified a lot of our conversations. We put the spotlight on an athlete, an athlete who's a person who's talking about his whole full humanity, which is one of the interesting thing about this article. And I guess I should back up. Scottie Scheffler is a very successful, relatively young professional golfer. This is an article right before the British Open, which he subsequently won, which is the highest, it's a pinnacle for most professional golfers, really at the peak of achievement. It has a long history and it's quite illustrious if you win. It's one of the majors, if you're not a golf fan. In any case, so what I found really interesting is that it brings to the surface something that I've observed among athletes talking publicly about their performance and their achievement, and this dilemma between focusing on the achievement and the process, what the goals and the achievement mean and what other sources of motivation are, and to resolve that. So the analog for me would be, okay, so you win, over at my institution, Berkeley or Princeton, these are professors who have attained at the highest level. Some of them have won Nobel Prizes, and they get up the next day and they walk into the lab and they do the same thing they did the day before. And that's not to say they don't like the achievement, the adulation, the attainment, but it's not the sole nor often the main motivation. And actually, this reveals a real dilemma in some of the motivation theory, which says, if you have these extrinsic motivators, they will quash and overwhelm intrinsic motivation, like love of learning or fascination or desire to improve. And I think this article can kind of puts that in question, and then begins to get to, well, what are some of the other motivational dynamics? What are the reasons why people achieve? What are they seeking? What are the needs and drives that they're acting on? So it's not all of that is in the article per se, at least by the author, but I think Matt and I both brought a lens to this, that we can kind of bring this framework of sense of self, deep intrinsic motivation, deeply internalized motivation, which would translate into meaning, purpose, and fulfillment, in combination with goals, attainment, achievement, adulation, and really trying to tease apart some of the differences and how they might sort of coalesce as well. So that hopefully that's a frame that puts the article, if people go and look at it, in relation to what we've been doing. Matt, any other framing or setup before we get into some of the specifics?
No, I think that was great. We'll have the link to the article in the description. It is behind a paywall, so I think it's, it would be good for us just to kind of say, what is the Sheffler Paradox? I don't think that's a phrase that's taken off at all. Maybe it has, but it does set up the article, because in a way it's trying to put, a paradox is basically two frames of reference that don't cohere, or you can't reconcile the two. So they're both there and they're both real, but you can't synthesize them in a way. So that's why it's a paradox. It's like, what's going on here? How can these two coexist? And so that's the idea of a paradox. So what is the paradox that is the Sheffler Paradox, if that's okay. I think it's the one frame of reference that we tend to ascribe to most high achievers, to athletes, to Nobel winning professors and scientists and whatnot, is that they're motivated by these goals, like these achievements and these accolades. They're motivated to win and win at all costs, and winning it's all about winning. So that's the frame of reference that we tend to impose, and that a lot of athletes do internalize. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was trying to think of the right word. And gets them up and gets them out there early in the morning and late at night working out. So that's one context. And then you have someone like Sheffler, and the article goes through a number of high achieving athletes who say, well, that wasn't it. Like, or I used to be motivated that way, but I'm no longer motivated that way. Or when I was motivated by this one concept and I achieved, it felt a little hollow, or I was always, or what's next? It didn't provide the fulfillment, the meaning, the joy that I was anticipating. And so they're now they've those who have come back or who are continuing, the athletes that are profiled, they are motivated by something different. And so that's the paradox. So what is that different thing that they're motivated and gets them to continue to achieve? And I don't think they in a way poo-poo their achievements. They celebrate them, but that's not the be all and end all of what they're about in their particular sport.
Yeah, and their life. So I think one thing I would add is it's a paradox from a certain vantage point. So the author and many people see these things as irreconcilable, incommensurate. Hey, this doesn't make sense. I think from our point of view, we say this makes perfect sense. Of course, we have different kinds of motivation, different reasons for our actions, the different motivation different ways, and that human beings are multifaceted. We have goals we want to achieve. That's not the same as fulfillment, meaning, and purpose necessarily. They can be, but they're not necessarily. So maybe I'll start with a quote. Sheffler says it very well, and in my opinion, in some ways, his words are the most illuminating, or maybe that's, to be fair, it's the ones that are most similar to our vantage point. So he says, I've worked as you say, he's not poo-pooing the achievements. He says, I've worked my entire life to become good at this game and play for a living, he said. It's one of the great joys of my life. But having success is not what fulfills the deepest desires of your heart. So it's interesting that he moved to the third person, your heart, one's heart. He's saying something about human beings, not just himself. You see that? It was I, that it's your heart. And I think that's actually really, I hadn't noticed that till just now. And I think we're going to parse some of the language pretty precisely here, just so people know, in part because we think it reveals some things about human motivations, human beings, our existential condition that people have some awareness of, but they don't really have a lens or a framework on it. We have that. So when we hear these words, we can say, or these terms or these phrases, we can say, aha, yes, you're getting at it.
Right.
So we can say it's not a paradox. It's that humans have different kinds of motivations operating at different levels of our sense of self, what's extrinsic, what's intrinsic, what's deeply internalized as a value or an aspiration. All of these things can be operating. It's simply that in sports, we often simply focus on the goals and extrinsic and external. That's not to say that's what's actually motivating people. That's just what we see typically, I would say. There's some other phrases. He talks about the fleeting euphoria, this elation and joy that accompanies success. And he contraposes that to, I think, fulfillment. We have different associations, right? Enduring, because they come from a different source, I think.
Right.
So I think maybe a couple of terms. Are you going to go, Matt? Go for it.
Well, I was going to say, what's interesting is that even though we're looking at elite athletes here, and we're talking about sports context, we're always thinking with a so what, and so this could be something
right.
to share at the end. But it's interesting that there's an if only, or when this happens,
Yeah.
motivation. And that's, like we talked about, to extrinsic. When I'm going to dedicate myself to achieve this thing and experience the euphoria of being number one. And that's going to somehow make life amazing for me. And that, you can distill that or abstract from that and say, how many of us are like, if only I get a new job, or if only I get more friends, or if I only get different friends, or a different partner, or a new partner, or a partner, like there's all these if onlys these conditionals that we create for ourselves. And we're not saying they're necessarily wrong. It's just how much we invest in them, and want our lived worlds to be different, or and we work really hard at it, but then there's something fleeting about it, that we've talked about before, how the things in the external world, they come and go. And so we invest so much in them, and we want them to be eternal. We want them to be lasting. We want them to be constant and always there and accessible, but they're not. And that's what elite athletes find out. They're so invested in it. And it's, I've been there. I've been like, I was like, oh, you just give so much of yourself to this that it creates its own momentum. And the idea of not being that way is like, you just can't step out of it because you are so invested. And then when you achieve something, it's like, well, it's just not enough. It just can't. We overload, because of our expectations. We overload what it can provide, and it could be a joyful moment. Like it can be a great moment. Like, I mean, I know, like even now, just like I know I play this platform tennis game, and up until this year, I would say, like, I still would go back to kind of performance anxiety, which we can talk about a little bit, but I was still like very much focused on the goal. And there's this thing called your PTI. And I was really like focused on trying to what's called lower my PTI. And when that didn't happen, I get all mad or frustrated. And, it's just like, this is so silly. And so now, like, I'm just more about enjoying the game, like I just want to be out there enjoying it. And then what's funny is that when you do achieve, like, the last, I'm on this, team, and we played, and my partner and I, we had no business against this other team. They were way better than us, but we ended up beating them. And, I had such a different experience because I was like, well, it was really fun game. We didn't start off well, but then we played really well and we ended up beating it. It was kind of, I mean, it was just like, it was joyful, but it's like, I didn't like there wasn't a sense of relief because I achieved that, which we can talk about, I guess, like this, anyway, I'm kind of rambling on, but
well, there's I might say there's having a goal and having desires, and then there's also the attachment to that, the fixedness in with which we hold that, the stakes that we attribute to that, right? So one thing I see here is just a kind of insight that I had as you were talking, and I was thinking about this. So why is it that elite athletes who achieve at the highest levels can say something about this? Because they've actually achieved the thing that so many of us want, but most of us don't get. So of course they're going to have a unique vantage point on that, right? So if you say, all my life I wanted to be a Super Bowl champion, there's a quote from Aaron Rodgers here, or I want to be an Olympic gold medalist. Very few people get there. So once you do, and then you realize, wait a second, this implicit model I had, a set of assumptions and beliefs. I will work hard. I will get this achievement. Then I will be happy. That set of beliefs and then the expectations that follow from that, when they're not realized, that's the only thing that can interrupt that belief.
Yep.
Right? Because you have to have had that experience that, it actually doesn't work. It didn't achieve what I expected. Huh.
Well, I think like there's such an intensity, because there's a devotion here that is above what a lot of us are doing,
right?
With our like, I just when I have my vacation, things are going to be great, like, right. But we do that. The stakes are high, but not so high or as high as what these elite athletes are experiencing because they've invested their entire selves. They had made incredible sacrifices in order to achieve. And so it's so intense that it becomes crystallized. Like it's not muddled by other daily concerns. Like it is like their point in life. And so yeah, it's to experience what it means to win and then feel hollow afterwards. It really strikes the core of who you are. And really leads to these existential questions and philosophical questions that you've mentioned initially.
Right. I think who you are and how you see the world. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the human condition. So, and I think that's the point. I believe that's one of the points you're making there at the end, is that what we're seeing, what these examples epitomize something that we experience every day. They are magnified. They're public. We see them.
Magnified's a good word. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just to finish the quote. I mean, I think again, the athletes, in my view, are often making the most profound quotes. So from the article, Aaron Rodgers, quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, go Pack. My parents are from Wisconsin.
Oh, so, yeah, I didn't know that.
All right. He wins the Super Bowl in 2011. Accomplishing he said the one thing he'd always wanted in life at the age of 27, and that left him feeling lost. Then he goes on to say, this is a direct quote, "Now what?" he asked. "I was like, did I aim at the wrong thing? Did I spend too much time thinking about the stuff that ultimately doesn't give you true happiness?" I mean, that's pretty darn close to what we're saying. And he doesn't say he did, but even to ask the question, I think, is pretty courageous and could invoke a lot of fear. Like, whoa.
Right.
So that's, I think that's pretty powerful. A lot of people don't ask, did I put my ladder on the wrong wall? Right. Did I mistakenly aim for this thing? And I think in his case, he's framing it as individually. I think we can look from our vantage point to say achievement. He uses the term true happiness. So a certain kind of happiness, not elation or sense of accomplishment. Those are all meaningful experiences, but they're not all the experiences. And there's something, again, that I think meaning, purpose, fulfillment can be achieved in athletic achievements. Apparently for him, they didn't. But I just appreciate that that vantage point on the other side of achievement gives you this clarity to say, I had this belief, I had these assumptions, the expectations were unmet. Boom, I have to rethink what's going on. And I think some people feel lost and bereft. And that's an awful experience. And then some people experience that and then say, they turn that into, okay, what does this tell me? What can I do differently? Or the case of the Olympic rower, she came back to the sport. So there's a Helen Glover. She's a British. She came back to sport later in life with a different vantage point, a different orientation. Maybe perhaps having achieved allows you to not have that as the goal anymore. I don't know. She doesn't say that, but there's a theme here of people. They frame it as they got older and wiser.
Right.
Yeah, I think maybe they adopted a different framework on meaning, purpose, and fulfillment.
Yeah, I agree.
It has nothing to do with their age, actually.
Yeah. No, and yeah, because I kind of have Piaget, Jean Piaget, and others. We had these these cognitive steps in your growth in your cognitive abilities, and what most people learn is the different stages, and they don't say, well, what leads a child to go from one stage to the next stage, not realizing that whatever stage they're in, that is a incomplete view of the world, and it starts to break down, and they have to at some point they're like they have to reconceptualize the world, and that's what leads to this jump to a new stage. And that's pretty fascinating. That's what's happening here in a way. At an existential level is you have a certain worldview, you have a certain way of understanding yourself in this world in achievement context. And then that kind of falls apart, and you have to do something there. Either just try to deny and just go back to what you believe, or you say, no, there's got to be something more here. And that's what a lot of these athletes would say, no, they still love their sport. They still love to win, I'd rather win than lose, but I want to enjoy the game, and take joy from it. And again, it's not like my whole purpose in life, but it's like, it's something I put a lot of time in because I really, really enjoy. I love playing. So can I play in that way and enjoy the wins when they come? So again, it's not it's not like they don't compete anymore. In fact, they are competing. As Helen Glover came back and wanted to compete, but it was the daily workouts with her fellow rower and coach, and it was that experience, that process, that became what she was about.
Right. So she was attending to a different aspect of this process, the experience of it. Maybe we can pull up a quote. Let's see. So, because she says it very well. I don't know if I'd share with quite the interpretation of the author, but I think she says it very well. Find that. Here's a quote too that captures this. Another Olympian: I had to have other forms of motivation, inspiration. Right. It sounds cliche, but it's very true. I found you really do have to find satisfaction and real joy in the everyday journey of getting better. So it's interesting that it's cliche, but not accepted. So it's kind of dismissed, like, it's just a cliche. Whereas it's does not question, success will bring you happiness. Right.
Well, can I set up Glover as you're looking for that?
Right,
to talk about something we were talking about before we started recording, was when they get to talking about Helen Glover, and just, she, I think she won the, I don't know, with the
twins gold or something like that. I don't know.
Sorry, I don't know crew and all that, but
all the crew members out there, apologies.
Yeah, 2-member rowing team. She won the gold in the London 2012 games. And as she said here, it goes, Glover believed that achieving her goal of Olympic gold was all she needed to be happy. She recalls going for a walk in the weeks before her first games, London 2012, and being confronted by a, quote, really clear thought that if, and I'll emphasize that, if I can just win the Olympics, I will never be sad again. And then she says, winning in London was a great moment, but not for the reasons I thought it would be. When I was 12, I thought you cross the finish line, punch the air, and feel this rush of success and excitement. But I crossed the line and felt nothing but relief for the fact that we had not mucked up. I felt a total disassociation with the moment. It was too big for me. So you can see how she's trying to reconcile that in the end, but I just want to highlight the fact that she goes, well, when I crossed the line and she felt relief. And this is the point you've made, with a lot of folks, when they get that A on the paper or whatever, they don't feel joy, they feel relief. Like, whew, I didn't mess up. And that's a really interesting dynamic that I think it's just pausing and exploring and trying to understand, well, what's going on that's the experience.
Right.
And we were talking about how, like, she starts off by saying, this goal, and the goal was a certain achievement to win Olympic gold. And there's a conditional there. There's if or when that happens, this will follow. I will never be sad the rest of my life. So in a way, the formula is like, if this happens, I'm fulfilled. But in that in that conditional, we, by considering it, like by thinking about it, you automatically put it in relief or in juxtaposition to it not happening, because it's an if. You say
you invoke that same possibility, the risk.
These two possibilities. One, I do get the Olympic gold. I don't get the Olympic gold. And that reality, that the fact that you may not achieve your goal, creates this anxiety. And not achieving your goal means I'm not happy. I'm not fulfilled. I'm not who I think I am. And so
other people think I am, and I hope that I become, or
like there's all these expectations, these needs, like, the stakes are high, right? I mean, really high. And so when it does happen, when the if becomes reality, we're like, because we did not want to experience this other possibility. We did not want that where I feel like a failure, life is pointless, meaningless. And so it's relief. And because that is what follows relief, we don't experience the joy that we could have of just like, wow, how exciting. I mean, maybe, but it becomes fleeting. But often it is this sense of relief. Like, I didn't experience that the dread that I might have experienced if I had not achieved. Anyway, so I just wanted, like, how that reflection, like you when you create this if, you automatically create the, well, not if, or if this, not that. Or
right, if you establish that as a goal, then you risk failing. That's from the framework from a kind of failure avoidance. So if you establish a goal, an aim, a desire, then you necessarily create a condition where you might not attain it. And if it's hard to attain, then you have a real risk.
Yeah, and you have to, because we are reflective creatures, you have to entertain that possibility. No way to deny it.
That's right.
And part of I don't know if I talked about this, I was talking about this the other day with how superstitious divers are and baseball players. Have we talked about this before?
I think you mentioned this. You and I have. I don't know if it was has been recorded, but
well, because I'll shut up for a little while. Diving, baseball players, there's probably even golf maybe, but like, you become very superstitious because you train
golf. People are doing the wiggles and the woggles and the yes.
Right. But you like, everything comes down to this like microsecond of performance. Whereas other sports, you can possibly get into a flow. Like, I know my two sons played rugby. They were baseball players and they both really enjoyed rugby, because rugby is like, it's just constant movement. You're going like, kind of like basketball. You can kind of get into a flow. You make a mistake, no problem. You got to move on. So it's a lot easier just to kind of lose yourself into the game, where baseball, you could be sitting around most of the game doing nothing. Then all of a sudden you bobble or drop a fly ball in the bottom of the ninth and lose the game, and that. Or batting and diving, true. I mean, diving, you train months and then you're at, the NCAAs or senior nationals or wherever your level, your conference meet, and you do X number of dives, 6, we used to do 11. And each dive is just a few moments. And if you blow one, you're out. And that. And so you kind of want some assurance that it's going to work out all right. So you create these superstitions, these rituals, to kind of help your anxiety, because you're like, like, I might blow it. There's that. So that just shows that reflective, you deep down, that there's this possibility that you could blow it. So how do you assuage yourself and kind of rid yourself of the fear and make it so it's going to be okay? Well, I'll create this ritual, then somehow that magically that will become the bridge to the other side of success. I don't know. So
I think we can contrast it to procrastination, which can do a similar thing, and that the ritual does foster the engagement with the task, right?
True. Yeah.
It might provide a potential obstacle. Well, that person stepped on my shoe and it ruined my ritual, so therefore, of course, I didn't perform. But I think, the idea of procrastination is that the sense of the risk of failure, what the aim there is to redirect or reattribute the reason for such a failure away from competence, right? It's not me, specifically my ability, right? And that if you read the lore of sports, there are people who definitely, even at the highest levels, who have taken in various ways, quote, self-sabotage, I would say performance sabotage, as a way to protect themselves. But I want to come back to this idea of relief too. It's just to be clear, we're not judging, at least I'm not judging these people that they felt relief. There's nothing wrong with them, in my opinion. What I want to use it for, you talked about how that actually interrupts joy and elation and the positive reinforcement that comes from that. And that's crucial because that's often the energy for the next thing. So I work with students and they don't feel a sense of triumph, achievement, joy, accomplishment from getting their performances. And then, so they're not getting the energy that would have come from that.
True.
And then that leads to burnout. So,
because they're kind of exhausting themselves by these self-protective and avoidance.
Well, even if they engage, it's still expending energy. So if you don't then say, that I think I've only had this in sports a couple of times. I won the league championship in my senior year, and I remember it surprised me. I went, I was like, whoa, where did that? I jumped down. I went, this moment. You see that Bruce Jenner, when he was Bruce Jenner, and people who had that famous sense of triumph, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'd never done that before. It just came out of me. Well, that gives you energy. That's it. It's in sport. It crystallizes this thing. If you have a sense of accomplishment, I attained my goal, did my best, I feel good about it. That's a very different experience. It comes from a desire to achieve, to perform, to learn, to demonstrate my knowledge, to be expert, which is different than to avoid looking less than perfect or not performing at this. And so that what I want to underscore is that if you felt relief, if that's the predominant emotion or experience state, that says something about your motivations,
right?
That and your attention, the properties of the motivation. So what is relief? It is the absence of a expected or dreaded negative consequence, right? That didn't happen.
Yep.
Okay, so what does that say about what was motivating you?
Right. You're
hoping for that thing not to happen. Now, that's not totally incommensurate with wanting something good to happen, but if that's your predominant feeling, that kind of certainly could say something, at the very least, for people to then say, what's going on here? To look, that's a moment. I thought I'd have a sense of triumph and achievement, but I didn't. I had a sense of relief. What can that tell me about me, my motivation? And then also I'd say your attention. Where do you put your attention? I think for athletes, it's really important where your attention is. But that brings us to the quote, so Glover is talking about, she wins and then she takes some time off, has some kids, comes back. She says, the motivation, she says, was waking up every day and training alongside my partner, Heather Stanning, and her coach, Robin Williams. Who wouldn't want to train alongside Robin Williams? I think it's a different Robin Williams. I had to make a joke. To find out the answer to one question: how good can we be? So to me, this says a lot. That's exploratory. That's experimental. That is, how good can we be? And then she goes on to say, it was just us versus us. Where's your attention? Is it on anybody else? No. They say you race how you train. And we trained every day with the mentality, the motivation, the intention, the engagement of how good can we be? Not, and here's a crucial word. I always listen for this word. Not just can we win. Wow, that flips it on its head, because they start with I think somewhere in this article, the famous Vince Lombardi quote, right? Like, it's not, how does it go? Winning isn't winning isn't the only thing, it's everything, whatever.
I think it's not everything, it's the only thing, or something like that. I don't.
Most important thing is the only thing. Sorry, we should know this, but especially as a Packer fan, I should know this. So forgive me. But the point is, she has some transformation where winning becomes is qualified with just. So it's diminished in the hierarchy of objectives. It is less than something else now in her new way of thinking. And you definitely hear athletes and people talking in those ways sometimes. Kobe Bryant's talked about that way. Giannis Antetokounmpo has talked about that. So it's not only these people, by the way. But I think inherent in this little anecdote is a lot of how people can deal with working in elite environments, us versus us. So we are going to compare. The question is, am I going to compare me to me or me to them? Then, and can I control that? To some extent, can I make that part of my intention and my attention? I think we can. It's hard. So we have the impulse to compare, but we can direct that impulse and our intention, our attention, to me yesterday, to me relative to my standards.
Right.
And then that reduces the expectation, because it's not relative. And that's also puts it within my control. I can't control what other students do on the test and what the curve's going to be. Thinking about that it's contingent, can only increase my anxiety because it's not out of my control. Or if I can say, am I going to do better than I did on the midterm? Or am I improving my writing skills? Or are we improving in my ability to analyze the market trends or whatever? It could be anything, not just for students. But in this, and then she's looking at the relations. Am I working collaboratively? Do I get meaning and sense of purpose from that? And that's a big part of a sense. It's the daily affirmation and enjoyment that comes with that, and a sense of locked arms, and we yoke together, as Marty used to say, and we work towards something. There's something special about that we gain when we work as a group, perhaps because of that sense of responsibility, and you see your colleague improve and you help them improve, and we're fundamentally social creatures. That's important to us. And then I really think this idea of, when I'm working with student athletes or others, students is to really try to have an experimental, exploratory perspective. And I find this works for me. So, can I do this is a much better. I wonder if I can do this is a much better framework for me than thinking about what's at stake, what's on the line.
Yeah, I just want to like when it becomes about improving yourself, and I think you make this point in your book, Life Beyond Grades, that grades then become not a performance measure, but a measure to help to show, like, to get that feedback. Yeah, which I thought was like, so it's not like, oh, let's get rid of grades. It's more like, grades can be incredibly useful and an incredibly positive interaction for you if you have the right perspective and framework to take that. So
the grades have to be delivered of certain things too. There's something on that side, but yes, for the individual.
Right. So I just want to yeah, and I just love the idea of, like, if it becomes like, how can I improve myself? Then you can, I think, you are opening yourself up to improving, like that detective, like, how am I holding myself back? And, where am I weak and how can I improve? So instead of like, oh, I need to be Superman or, Superwoman, super person here, and always performing and hiding your weaknesses, even from yourself, you can say, oh, like, you be more open to feedback. Like, can you read this paper for me and tell me how I can improve? Or, like you can have like a training mentality, and you want a coach to come in and show you where you're doing well, and but also to say, hey, you need to improve here. You'd be like, oh, great, because I want to get better. So I think that's just, that mentality is so helpful and can be energizing in itself. And admitting where you're not performing at your best, where you're weak, quote unquote, and then addressing that, really working on it and improving, that's really exciting. That's really awesome. And yeah, it's hard because, to get out of that performance mentality and more of a training mentality and improve, so you can really improve and grow, that's really hard for a lot of people. I think it might be easier for athletes just because that's what you're doing all the time, is training, and trying to.
I was gonna say, it's funny. I was about to say I think it can be harder, but I think it can be both, right? They know the time that goes into it. The public. So you have your community on your team, or whether that be if it's a team sport, or even your team in the sense of your trainer and your coach and your nutritionist or whoever at these high levels. But the point made in the article is athletes are generally measured by their outcomes and their results.
Right.
There's some great people out there who transcend sport and have you, or they're who they are on the court, on the field, but mostly that's it. So we have to, as an athlete, you could easily succumb to that, right?
Yeah, I know it's an interesting point. Like, I would say, as a former athlete, and as someone like now, like who does devote some time to this one game, I'm always like even now, I'm like, I really want to play folks that are better than me. Like tonight, I know I'm I'm playing like in the upper, and I'm like, I'll probably get slaughtered tonight. Like, we'll probably get my partner and I will probably get beat pretty bad. But I'm like, I'm excited about it because it's better teams expose where you're weak and where you need to improve. And I kind of want that because that's going to help me. Like those experiences help, like, I can't be doing this and I can't be doing this. And then I take that back and work on it. And as an athlete, that's just, I don't know, it seems like that's more common as an athlete, but maybe.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that's more adaptive. It's probably more useful. It's certainly the lore. It's what you're supposed to say. I think that's what you're supposed to say as an athlete. I want to play the highest competition. Yeah. Do you want to? Yeah. Okay. I think that's true. Just let me finish.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, I think we just always want to be careful. What's the preferred belief in the community? You're supposed to say that as an athlete, so we have to be a little skeptical. And so I think those who genuinely believe that and orient that way will find benefit. And it's not that it doesn't happen, but I think there's also, number one, you're supposed to say that. But really, what I think, if you just scratch the surface, you're going to say, I want to play the highest level and win. You're not finishing the sentence. And,
but
this is also
my point. It wasn't so much.
Let me finish. This is not purely opinion. This is not purely opinion. There's an empirical point that we made here. So in the book Flourishing by Seligman, the reason that achievement and accomplishment are in the framework for PERMA V, which is about well-being, he gives us an example of, he's a world-class bridge player. And he talks about wanting to play a beautiful game with his partner. And that's the source of fulfillment. But he realized that other people just want to win. They can play a crappy game and win, and they don't care. They won. And that he says this is a feature of human beings, that accomplishment qua accomplishment, winning as winning, for some people, is the thing. Now, I think we're saying, so that is the motivation. That's the profile of a person. And that's at a high level. This person is a world-class bridge player. But the point I think we're saying is something a little different, which is you want that, you want it powerfully, but will that bring you fulfillment? That's a different thing. So I think we have to tease that out a little bit.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just want to say my point wasn't so much playing higher competition. That was an example of athletes being more open to being detectives and seeing where their game is weak, and thus, trying to improve it. That was my point.
Yeah, I get you. I'm sorry. I think, I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical of the lore of athlete. I was an athlete. So a lot of people are not coachable. A lot of athletes are not coachable.
True.
I think coachable would be a shorthand for what you're talking about. But talk to coaches. They're like,
that's a good point. I think, that's a good. That's.
I think probably the best are.
Yeah.
Right. The best are. I mean, I love Tom Brady said to somebody, asked him about something about the game plan, and he's like, "I'm the quarterback. He's the coach." Like, what do you mean? He tells me what to do, and I do it. Is this, he's supposed to? Like, no. Like, he's coachable. He's saying that's what the coach does his job. My job as an athlete is to be coachable. And I don't think that's a coincidence that a very seemingly average athlete became a high achiever. Like, if you're coachable, you can go a long way. But I think it also says, and even the question and the interaction with the interview suggests, not all these top performers are coachable.
No, that's a fair point. And I wasn't trying to say it's like every athlete's that way. I think it's like I think you might be more inclined, or at least in that pool, you might find more who are coachable, detective. But I think
it's a dilemma. Let's just unpack that. Why would a high achiever not be coachable? So I think that's what I encounter at Berkeley and Princeton, right? So these are students. I mean, I start with that. Why wouldn't you listen to me? You've achieved. You got into the most selective institutions in the world. Why? Who am I? You. Why would you listen to me? Why would you change? That doesn't make any sense. That certainly is risky, unless you understand and believe that you've gone to another level that's qualitatively different, that's going to demand you to do different things. If you don't have that assumption or belief, and I think it makes sense that you wouldn't necessarily, you're going to have to change your game. You're going to have to change how you do things at this level. I think that could make sense, that it comes back to beliefs. What do you imagine your condition to be? What is this situation? What is this context? Is it one more of the same, or is it a next level, another thing? And then are you willing to let go? So if you've had a string of successes that were largely automatic, came from natural ability, didn't include a lot of setbacks, as I think I mentioned this before, my colleague at Harvard used to say their students were failure deprived. You've not had that and had to adapt, then you come to a place where you do need to. That can be really, really difficult. So I think, and then because of the string of uninterrupted sort of automatic natural successes, and I talk to a lot of coaches on campus and they'll say the same thing, right? Like in some ways, if it's those people who are able to achieve without changing, without being coached, they're the hardest to deal with.
Yeah, that's true.
But I don't want to just talk about in terms of what's hard. I think, but why motivationally, right? So we could take it to the sense of self. I am good at this. I'm a natural, right? What would it mean to seek coaching? What would it mean to get that feedback to our sense of self? I don't think the coaches are going there. I think what it means is, but I've always been this, and now this environment is saying that I'm not, and it's more painful to acknowledge that than it is to not achieve.
Yep. No, I think that's right. No, I mean, you maybe think of, I was coaching a baseball team, like a little league team here. We formed a travel team, and part of what we did was try to find better competition for them, to show them that they weren't as good as they thought they were. I mean, you can do that too much. Like we went into this one league we just got destroyed, and the kids got demoralized. So you have to, you got to be careful, but you want them to be challenged.
Yeah.
And you're right. So if they get to a point where they're just thinking they're amazing, and that might be in your conference, but then are they going to the nationals, whatever, where they're going to face higher competition and then realize that they're not as good as they thought they were? Yeah. So I think your point is well taken. Yeah.
So, okay, what I got to wrap up here, but what's any final thoughts? What's a takeaway for you from this?
Well, I'm planning on enjoying my game tonight.
Excellent.
Learning about my weaknesses. No, I think, the point of this is just it's a great example of what we talk about all the time. Is like, we're all creatures who seek meaning, purpose, and fulfillment and self-worth. And it's easy to invest ourselves and dedicate and devote ourselves to pursuits that are extrinsic and we can't control, and ultimately, and that can be fleeting. And and here's, this article is great because it goes to a bunch of athletes who have done that, and they're on the other side of it. And they say, my whole world kind of crumbled because I thought I would have this experience, but I had this other one where, of relief, they say getting the monkey off your back, all these, and like we're saying, like, do you want to live that way? Learn from these athletes, learn from us if possible, that there's, you don't have to be where you're, to your formula, performance equals ability equals worth. We're trying to break people out of this fear-based, fear-driven way of living, where we create all these mechanisms to protect ourselves and really kind of entrap ourselves in these limited worldviews. And there's a better life out there, but you have to kind of come to realize that this one way of viewing the world, or general way of viewing the world, is just it is limiting. So I guess that's
general, limiting, and common.
Yeah, very common. Yeah.
And so I think my last point would be, I think sometimes we worry that maybe people think, oh, this is so esoteric and abstruse, these ways you're talking about the existentialism and obscure Buddhist, but once you have this framework, you can read an article in the New York Times that is useful and enlightening, but then bring another lens. It's very practical. We're talking about what we do on a daily basis, how you think,
Yep.
what to feel like, how do you relate to yourself? I mean, these are really practical matters that we're talking about, as quotidian, if not mundane, as there is. Why are you going to get up and do the thing today? I mean, that's pretty basic,
Right.
And not far removed from our daily human experience. So, I think
that's a big, but again, that's a big point. Like that, our first talk was on self-awareness, because a lot of people don't make that connection. They're like, well, I'm just going about my day. Well, it's like, no, you're wrapped up in this quest and you don't even realize it. You've got to realize, that your self-worth is always on the line, and you're always somehow managing it, either, through avoidance, protection, or through exploration and,
purpose and fulfillment. To use Sheffler's words, the deeper needs and desires that bring happiness and fulfillment in your life. And
anyway, great article. Again, we'll post it in the description. A great discussion, Nick. Thanks for recommending this article for us.
Thanks, Matt. It was fun. A little different for us.